Could the Knicks find themselves a real contributor at the 50th pick in the NBA draft? I've got my buddy Prez on to start talking NBA draft today on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So on today's show, I'm joined by my buddy Prez, who you might have seen just a few weeks ago talking about the NBA playoffs with me, but is here doing what he does best, talking NBA draft. Crazy late in the cycle, I feel like. We're finally getting into some draft talk. I get a little existential with Prez in terms of this draft. We talk through what the quality of this draft is, how the Knicks should approach it from a broad strokes perspective. Also, just if there's contributors potentially in this draft as late as pick 50 that the Knicks can potentially find and draft and have on their team, because as we know, they're going through a coaching search, and there's a possibility that if they find a diamond in the rough, that guy could get playing time as soon as this year. So we'll see how that all goes. But for today, talking with Prez, getting a good idea, good feel for this draft class and the overall scope of it, and then towards the end, in the first part of this multi-part episode, we start getting into some specific names that Prez really likes and that he thinks could potentially be trade up candidates or even possibly someone that could slip to the Knicks and be a really good pick for them at pick 50. So lots of good stuff to talk about. Let's not hold it up any further and get right into it. All right, as promised, I'm joined by Prez, the Strickland's resident draft expert, to start getting it. I can't believe I'm saying start getting into draft things midway through June. I've been openly pining, Prez, to be able to get back into draft things for weeks now, and the Knicks just had to start a coaching search and create a bunch of breaking news immediately after getting eliminated from the playoffs, and it robbed me of my ability to start talking about the 50th pick in the NBA draft that the Knicks hold, that I'm frankly quite excited to see what they ultimately do with, because we love rookies. We love bringing in new players. We love young guys that we can root for until we know for sure that they're not actually good. It's a great time. I love draft content. Haven't gotten to do nearly enough of it this year so far. I guess though, Prez, against all that, first, where do you stand coaching search wise? Bearing in mind, for anyone listening to this might come out as late as Friday. We're recording this on Monday, June 16th at about 7 p.m. So if any of this is dated, we could just hold it against you, I guess. But how are you feeling about the coaching search at this particular moment?
I'm pretty at peace, man. I'm just happy we got a coaching search, and the way things led to the coaching search and what little information we've gleaned from reporters about it have made me pretty confident. I know there's a lot of people who, for whatever reason, the nature of the search, the way Tibbs was fired, has made them nervous, to say the least. And I'm not among that group. I'm on board with how they're rolling, so I'm kind of just kicking back and letting them do their thing.
Yeah, you and me both, and I'm totally with you. The nerves are not there for me. I feel like this is one of the most normal coaching searches of all time that has been deemed unnatural for some reason. So I don't know what has changed in the last year in terms of how teams look for coaches, but it seems like the Knicks are going pretty by the book. So we'll let them cook. And in the meantime, we will start talking about the draft, where hopefully Walt Perrin, the Knicks head of scouting, has hopefully been cooking, thinking of some good guys to go after in the late stages of the second round. The Knicks, of course, do not have their own first round pick this year, thanks to the Mikal Bridges trade. They do not have their own second round pick this year, thanks to allegedly tampering in the acquisition of Jalen Brunson a couple years ago. But they do have the Memphis Grizzlies second round pick, which fell to 50th, which actually is better than what the Knicks pick would have been. So that's solid, I guess. So they do have a second round pick. So they're not completely draft pick less in this draft. So I guess starting off conceptually, Price, considering the Knicks in sort of an unprecedented move took four guys last year. They all got pretty minimal playing time this past year, though. We didn't necessarily get the best look at what these guys could potentially be as pros. So maybe the Knicks still look at them as like young guys that they can essentially have play almost like rookies next year, especially guys like Pacom, who really got very little time at the NBA level. How would you be treating the draft this year if you were the Knicks this year? Are you trying to like be aggressive about potentially moving up for people? Is there what do you think about this overall class? Like if you were Leon Rose and then by proxy, Walt Perrin, Brock Aller, all the various brain trust worldwide West, how would you be approaching this draft this year as the Knicks?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me again. Always fun
Mhm.
to join you and your very Carmelo Anthony-esque Wu-Tang Mets hat.
Literally, I did buy this because I saw him wear it during the playoffs, and I pre-ordered it, and it just came today. I was very excited to
I
wear
didn't even know he did that. I just knew that he would do that, which is
it.
why I was confident with that joke. But
I would
glad to see
never
that I was right.
I would never rock the Yankees and Mets one, though. That one is sacrilege. I don't understand what
No,
he's ever.
no, that one is
Yeah.
diabolical.
Mhm.
I'm glad you have some lines you won't cross. Yeah, so the first, I guess, constraint is one that I'm not really smart enough to know, which is like I know by the time all the trades were said and done and Mikal was in a Knicks uniform, they were like dealing with margins of thousands of dollars and nothing more than that. So for all I know, like the difference between how much the 25th pick versus the 35th pick versus the 50th pick makes might be important for whatever they got cooked up in terms of how their cap sheet looks next year. So that could definitely be a factor. And I know there's like they don't have to keep. You mentioned that they took four rookies, four players. They don't have to keep all of them, and some of them are on two-way contracts, and two-way contracts impact the cap sheet differently and all that stuff. So that's kind of just the asterisk hanging over this discussion. It's like I'm sure there's a lot of important information about that impacts how many picks they could make or where they could pick, but I'm gonna kind of pretend that it's all good and I don't have to worry about that for purposes of this discussion.
Yeah, that's kinda where I sit as well. I mean, I I kinda trust them to do whatever move is right in terms of what it does for them and the cap as well, which I think is kinda I was gonna ask you about that later, but we may as well just get out of the way now. Like, I do think the cap hell of it all is a factor in how the draft is being approached, and I think particularly by the Knicks right now, like, how they approach last year's draft, getting more players on the roster on contract, knowing that they had just completed the Mikal Bridges trade, like minutes before the draft, if I remember correctly. It was like, or I guess it was the OG. The OG extension was like minutes before the draft, but the Mikal trade they had, I think, completed just like days before, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember the OG extension literally breaking as Gavin and I were going to Barclays Center to get to cover the draft in person together. And then we're like, well, I guess before the draft starts, we better sit here and like record a podcast about this. Um, Either way, with the whole cap hell of it all, it seems like these second round contracts are more important than ever. I think due to the new CBA, there's more flexibility in terms of being able to pay a guy in the second round a little more money than you used to, which is good in terms of tradable salary and salaries that you can tack on to a trade or whatever. Tyler Kolek comes to mind with that, who I think might actually make more money than Paco Mdadie or is very close. The Knicks basically maxed out what his second round slot was allowed, which is over $2 million a season, um, which is great. I mean, I think that one, it gets more young talent on the Knicks, and I do trust their scouting department quite a bit in the Leon Rose era. So I think that they're good at identifying good late first round and second round talent, and they've proven that time and again. So that the prospect of having this 50th pick is pretty appealing to me. I guess what I'll say to kind of lead into the overall discussion of this draft. So considering how important those second round slots are and the second round salaries and how important they are for avoiding aprons and stuff like that, there's also been a lot of talk this year, I think, and I think I've talked to you about this. I've talked to various other people. Uh, just in terms of the depth of this draft, it seems to be one that's pretty heavy on older players and on experienced players and players that could potentially be contributors within their first couple years in the NBA. How do you feel about this draft class compared to others in terms of the depth that it has with older players, guys that might be able to step in and contribute, and particularly for the Knicks, like maybe guys that, along with last year's draft class, might be able to find some playing time under a new coach that might be a little more willing to entertain the idea of playing some younger guys. All right, we'll be right back in to hear from Prez about the overall quality of this draft class and whether he thinks the Knicks can potentially find a real contributor late in this draft. But first, I want to let you all know that this show is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. And this year's matchups are already delivering. And if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games, which obviously we're in the finals right now. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip off. And with killer last minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprising fees, Game Time is a total game changer. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't think anyone here is necessarily trying to go to Oklahoma City or Indianapolis to go see a game. So let me pitch you guys instead on baseball. Go see some baseball. It's the summer. It's the sport of the summer. Good old baseball. And no matter what team you're rooting for, Mets, Yankees, there's always good seats to be had on Game Time. Just last week, actually, I went to a Mets game with one of my friends, and he actually, funny enough, hit me up because he heard me delivering my Game Time ad on Locked On Knicks, and then said, "Hey, you want to go to a game?" And I was like, "Sure, but make sure you get the tickets from Game Time." And that's what we did. We went on there, checked it out, used code Locked On NBA, got $20 off, which I'll get to in a second. But it was a great time. You could do it spur of the moment. The best part is that Game Time really caters to the last minute ticket buyer and the person who just decides on a whim that they want to go check out a game. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Yeah, so what we're seeing this year is going to become more normal in terms of like the age of some of the declaring players because of the NIL deals. So there's a big incentive for players. There's two types of incentives for older players who are 20 to stay till they're 21, 20 to 22, 20 to 20, 22 to 23. And that's number one, if you're like, some people might take you in the first round, but you're not a surefire first rounder, then you might just be like, screw it, I'm going to get this big NIL money and then come back. And then I could be a fringe first rounder again. And then there's, the usual type of returners who are players who are like, I could go in the teens, but I feel like with another year, or freshmen who are good, but like with another year might go like in the top 10 or something like that. So for like lots of different groups of players, there's incentives to stay back with the NIL money. Especially like if you're a dominant college player and an upperclassman, those are the guys who get the, outside of marquee type top 5 picks, those are the guys who get wild NIL money checks. So it's going to be, every draft class is going to have a little bit more older prospects and a little bit less depth of like 20 to 21-year-olds on the most part compared to past years. most of the freshmen who are really good, they're declaring regardless because the NBA money, especially if you're a top 20 pick, is not something you pass on, especially if you're a lotto pick. So that's pretty much going to be unchanged. So with that being said, like this class doesn't have a bunch of talent packing the top of the draft, like guys who for sure you can build your franchise's offense around. And it's just Cooper and Cooper Flagging to a lesser extent, Dylan Harper, and then after that, you kind of have a blob of about 10 players depending on who you are. You might have a different order, and then after that, you got a blob of like probably like 20 players. So if you're picking in the top in the lotto, there's a little bit of it's kind of like a slightly disappointing buffet to pick your food from, unless you're picking first like Dallas. Of course, these guys are still good prospects, and some of them might be more than good, but there's just a little bit less in the way of like, oh, this guy for sure has a high ceiling. There's no LaMelo Ball going number 3 here or anything like that. But after that, it's a pretty flat draft, and like it's not quite as deep in the end of the first, early second with talent as past years because of all that NIL stuff. There was a lot of players, including one of your favorites, who a lot of people who, whether it's draft fanatics like me or people who were just more tuning in for the tournament, were like, oh man, I hope my team steals this guy in the end of the first round because it seems like he's really good, even though his stock has dropped. And it feels like half the players who fit that description just went back to school. And like literally like 10 of those guys, like every week I was crossing off another person of my like, oh, if this guy falls to the second, the Knicks should trade up and find a way to get this player or whatever. So that kind of stinks. And there's going to be talent. It's just, it takes it's going to take a better scout job to find that talent than normal.
Yeah, it is interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but now that you bring it up, the NIL thing, it does make a lot of sense because so often we see guys that, or we used to see guys that would try to cash out a little too early, and it
Mm-hmm.
was obvious that they weren't quite ready for the NBA yet, and then they would get to the NBA and then they would flame out ultimately and probably cost themselves millions upon millions of dollars just on the damage it would do to their reputation, even though some of them would become decent players overseas or whatever. But some of them just kind of never were able to realize their potential because they tried to come out early. But now those guys, I mean, if they stay at their school, they can still make money. And, it's not like they're, just getting like free meals or whatever and free room and board and that's it anymore. Like now they can actually make real money in college, capitalize on how good they are at that level, and then take the chance later about trying to go to the NBA and proving that they're good enough to, be at the next level. And obviously, for some guys it doesn't make any sense to not go to the NBA because it's like, well, you're going to make millions upon millions of dollars in the NBA and like you're a guaranteed top 10 pick or whatever. But for those like further down the board, uh, you know, guys in the teens, the 20s, especially the second round, I could definitely see where if they're an underclassman and they have eligibility left, it's like, well, I could go back next year and make like, I don't know, $500,000 or something. Like, why would I not just do that? Like, that seems like a pretty solid bet, and I can better my game and maybe get a better crack at it in the draft next year. So that is all very interesting. That's something that I hadn't really thought about before you just said it, but makes a ton of sense in terms of how the last couple years have gone in terms of older players, you know, kind of being the ones that are more in the draft more so than a ton of younger guys, and certainly not very many younger guys like in the second round and stuff that you potentially have a shot at. So moving towards who you might potentially be targeting. I mean, I guess the first thing that I can do here to help you do my job for me is say what I know that you're a big proponent of three like umbrellas to put players under for the most part, because I've covered your draft stuff for long enough. You've got guards, you've got wings, you got bigs, right? And I think that most people uh, would agree that that's kind of a good way to classify the modern NBA. And then within those, you're going to have, various sub classifications of guards, bigs, and wings in terms of how much they can create, or whether they're better on defense, or whatever. But if you were going to pick a particular group, and you can make this as brief or as in depth as you want, what direction would you be looking to go if you're the Knicks? If especially if you only hold at that 50th pick, would you potentially be looking to build out the guard rotation, the wing rotation, or the big rotation? If you're the Knicks, and feel free if you want to even just rank them in terms of like 1, 2, 3 of what your priority list would be. All right, just a second. We're going to start getting into the particulars of how Prez would approach this draft and what broad player grouping he would potentially target if he was Leon Rose and company with that 50th pick in this draft. But first, I got to let you know about our friends at OLIPOP. And OLIPOP is a new kind of soda made for people who love the classic taste of soda but want something that supports their health. With just 2 to 5 grams of sugar and 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every can, OLIPOP is reimagining soda in a way that's better for your gut. Traditional sodas are loaded with sugar, like 39 grams in a regular Coke or 44 grams in an orange Fanta. OLIPOP flips that script with just a fraction of the sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and gut-friendly ingredients like Ollie Smart, blend shown to support digestive and overall health. It's so that it tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for your body. Full disclosure, I am currently drinking coffee because I'm recording this in the morning. But if you're watching throughout this episode, you'll catch me drinking an OLIPOP vintage cola. It's my absolute favorite. I definitely am one of those where a Coke or a Coke Zero, even, it's kind of my guilty pleasure that I indulge in from time to time. But OLIPOP has made it so I don't have to do that. I can just have an OLIPOP and not feel bloated afterwards, not get that like sickly sweet taste in the back of my throat afterwards like you do after regular soda. And honestly, they say the stuff about it being better for your gut, it's for real, man. It makes you nice and regular. And yeah, I won't go any further than that. This is a family program, but it's good stuff. It works really well. So get a free can of OLIPOP. If you buy any 2 cans in store, they'll reimburse you for one. So head to drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba to claim your free can and find OLIPOP near you. That's drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm gonna give like an annoyingly complicated answer.
I love
So
I love annoyingly
there,
complicated.
so it's my default setting in life. There's so like normally I would actually say any of those buckets would be helpful for the Knicks in a vacuum. Just because they have 2 really good centers in Cat and Mitch. Hugporty, who I think is a pretty good bench center. So maybe a little bit less priority on that because you're essentially talking a third or fourth big, even with Mitch's injury stuff. And then wings and guards. Wings are we just have a thin wing rotation after Josh Hart. And then guards, we have talented guards. But there's still certain types of guards that we kind of could use more of, which is like Dante type dudes who just chuck, and guys who can dribble, penetrate, and score. Kolek can penetrate, but even if he did get playing time under a new coach and he got comfortable, he's never going to be like the type of guy to just knife you up like TJ McConnell to score or something like that. So that's helpful. The Knicks don't really have enough ball handlers, secondary ball handlers. So that's kind of in a vacuum how I would do it. In reality, if you look at most drafts in the second round, especially the back halves of the second round, it's really, I know we just found a fire backup center in the end of the second round, literally last year, but that's pretty rare. Usually, like the centers who make it to the end of the draft are like seniors and senior centers rarely pan out. So if you're looking at bigs, you really want to look at international players who might be a little younger or a little under the radar, or in Huck Porty's case, fell because of injury concerns, stuff like that. And then for guards, if you're looking at guards in the very end of the draft, it's usually pretty slim pickings. It's like really short guys who are talented, but it doesn't matter because they're like 5'11", or guys who have athleticism and great strength and bodies, but are just terrible shooters or something like that. It's like fatally flawed kind of players. So your best hope is in that late, like if we stick around 50, are probably wings. For that reason, just because you're more likely to find like wings are more likely to kind of inexplicably drop. Like I was just going over past draft, like Isaiah Joe was picked like 46th for no reason, like stuff like that, where you're just like, okay, like I liked Aaron Neesmith more than Isaiah Joe, but like 30 picks more, no, that's crazy. So like stuff like that for whatever reason happens, just because with wings it's like, okay, like they can't dribble, they're not going to initiate the offense, but they can shoot. But like, are they going to score more than just spot up shooting? And yeah, they play defense, but like, are you going to, is your upside swing going to be on like a defensive player that late, right? When their offense leaves something to be, there's a lot of reasons to talk yourselves out of wings, I feel like. A little bit less so. I feel like teams are less stupid about that than they used to be, but that would be my bet. That being said, if they find some players that they really like, which is usually how they operate, is they find players they really like in the second round, and then they try to figure out what's the lowest pick we can acquire and still draft this player. That's what they did with Deuce. That's what they did with Tyler Kolek. That's what they did with Dadier, even though he wasn't a second rounder. So if they find a player they like and they could get to the 40s or 30s, they have enough second round picks that it's probably easy with like their Brock Aller trade sorcery to just be like, all right, we're going to trade the 50th plus 1 second rounder to get to 41. And then we're going to trade 41 and cash for 39. And then 30 at 9 plus a second rounder gets us to 34. And boom, you've moved almost 20 spots up, right? Like, so they can do stuff like that. And once the higher you get, the closer to like 30, then you get, all right, you get a higher chance of, okay, this player might actually be a first round talent that dropped, which is how they felt about Deuce. That's probably how they felt about Tyler Kolek. And every year there are first round talents that are pretty much consensus that fall into the 30s. So that's always a possibility too for them.
Yeah, looking at I am blessed with having a cheat sheet to guide me along on who your favorites are here, because I've been looking over your second round flyer guide for the Knicks over the last couple of days, trying to get it ready to post on the Strickland. And I'm looking at currently your second round flyer wish list, and it's headlined by 3 guys that you say should be first round talents, but potentially could hit the second round. So I'm going to ask your opinion on those 3 guys because I'm curious. And you've ranked them already on this list, so I'll just say first, I'm going to probably screw this first guy's name up because I've never said this name out loud before. But Adu Thiero is your number 1. Drake Powell and then Bennett Sturts are your 3 guys that you say should be easy first round talents. Thiero is from Arkansas, if I am not mistaken, and is a big athletic wing that you say is kind of a guy that the Knicks are missing that archetype of. So why don't you make a case for him first? Because it seems like someone that you think could potentially be a good guy to make those sort of moves for, to go get and bring to MSG.
Yeah, so Thiero, he's probably the guy I'm highest on relative to consensus. And that being said, there's other people who also have him in the teens, just like I do, even with that. And he played for Cal. at in college, and he the main reason he's dropped and he's sometimes mocked in like the early second is he can't really shoot. His shot, if you look at his shot, you wouldn't be like, oh, it's busted. You'd be like, oh, like it's fine. But it didn't really go in that much. But I think he's a slightly better shooter than the numbers show. Not that I think he's some good shooter, but like he's the type of guy who it wouldn't surprise me if he became proficient in time, especially given he's not some older prospect or something like that. And then when you put the jump shot aside for like 5 seconds, he's like 6'7". He's an incredible athlete. Like he's not some Thompson twin type or anything, but in terms of just being like really functional, like he gets the most out of his strength in his hops. He crushes the glass. He goes in for blocks on the weak side. He dunks that. He had like 40 dunks or something crazy like that. So like he has jump speed. He jumps up fast. His second jump is good. There's some players who, they hit the layup lines. They hit a one-on-none fast break and they could bust out a crazy jam. But in the half court, they're not really doing anything with their hops. He's not like that. The hops come into play all the time. And that's what let him be such an impactful college player on offense, even though he wasn't really, initiating offense or hitting threes or anything like that, because guys couldn't do any. It didn't matter if players played off of him when he was off ball. If he just get like a step of momentum, he was getting to the paint and he was rising up and he was finishing. He was hitting layups and he's just enough of a jump shooter that you got to like worry a little bit. So he has a little bit of development needed on offense. And then on defense, he's like already a fully formed like NBA plus defender. Like if he ended up on the Thunder, it wouldn't surprise me. And then next year, everybody would be like, oh, they got this demon defender. Who is this guy? He's 6'7" with 7-foot wingspan and hops, and this guy is Caruso's new Padawan or Dort's new Padawan, and it'd be so annoying. So I really hope that doesn't happen. But he's the type of player who can give you impact off the bench, at least during the regular season. And if he falls to the second round and you have a chance to get him in the 30s, that's a pretty good outcome. So I would definitely, anytime you could get a good floor with some upside in the 30s, that's a good pick. So that's why he was number one on my list.
Okay, that's all with Prez for today, but tune in later this week and I will have more specific players that he's looking at on his big board that he thinks the Knicks should potentially go after with the 50th pick, along with a little review of last year's draft class and how we feel about the 4 guys that the Knicks took last year and how that might maybe affect things this year. So lots more great stuff to come with Prez. That's next time on Locked On Knicks. But for now, thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace out, everybody.